Hello friends. So this is part 2 for my little vlog series on determination and this experiment that I'm doing. So it's been a little over 2 weeks now, and I'm going to try to do a video about every week, I would say. We'll see how that goes. But wanting to share some updates on what I've been experiencing, which has been really, really exciting. I won't lie to you, there's probably a very small part of me that was hoping that this wouldn't work so that I could just be like, yay, I can go back to eating all the variety and all the things that I want to eat. But a much bigger part of me is so stoked on the fact that it's happening so quickly, the shifts. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how I feel after a few months. And I'm actually at a place where I'm like, I think I'm going to go for 90 days instead of 30, just to give myself like a more of a chance for my body to really understand what's happening, because 30 days to me feels like I'm still in that like reset mode, right? Because I've been eating like this, I've been eating many ingredients my whole life, so to expect 30 days to be enough to like reset my gut, reset the system, and experience what this could really do is probably not a big enough time. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know if it's going to be the 90 days of like extreme or if it's going to be like a little more lenient, but I will keep you guys updated. So the biggest things that I'm noticing: clarity, mental space, the way that my mind is speaking to me is a lot less harsh, or in the moments that it is harsh, there's less of a charge to it, if that makes sense. So let me give a better example. I've had a really, really negative, pessimistic, mean mind, especially around food. And it's been programmed for like probably over, 10 years especially, where this has been like a really big issue in my life. And so that voice has become very, very harsh and very charged. Like it's created, well, I don't want to take a breath for a second to I just recorded another video and I still feel a lot of energy from it. Okay. So I'm trying to find a way to maybe bring this into an easier explanation. So you know that if we have a habit or a pattern or cycle in our life that's been repeating for a long time, that it feels so much like a part of our identity. It becomes a part of like our sense of self. So who I've believed myself to be as Kaylee has had this kind of like cluster of thoughts, stories, ideas, emotions. It's connected to so many parts of who I am in my psyche and in my body, in my past, in my ancestry. But that, it feels like this big ball of like, almost like a ball of darkness inside of me that's been such a big part of my identity. And within that, because it's all around food, but it's something so much deeper than food. But food has been the way that I've perceived it, that food is the problem. That's how my mind has perceived it, and that I'm the problem. And within that, this ball of darkness has had so much stimulation, whether it was through my mind of these highs of like harsh critiquing, being like, you're doing this wrong, you're guilty for this and this and this, so much shame, this cycle. And then when I would be eating good, or when I would be eating in a way that my body felt really good, then I would be doing good and I would be good. And so I was dealing with this ball of darkness that was kind of like this band-aid in a way, this thing of holding me away from what was actually at the core of what I needed to look at in myself. Just a lot of emotion, a lot of my own real shadows. But it felt easier to deal with this shadow that I kind of created around food rather than going to the root cause. And so I'm going to put that on hold for a second to the side, but just remember that a big part of that was the stimulation, the highs and lows, like all of this drama. It was a huge ball of drama. That's how I would put it. 10 years worth of drama. And so, bookmarking that, when we are not giving our body the right fuel, what our body actually wants to eat, what our digestive system actually can handle, our body is so intelligent that when we're consuming the wrong kind of fuel, it sends signals out that something's wrong. And the mind is so linked with the body, and it's not one and then the other. They both influence one another. So when the mind experiences that the body has something going wrong with it, it's sending out a signal like, hey, stop eating that way. Hey, this isn't the fuel you want. Hey, change something. The mind starts to get really loud because it's trying to understand what the problem is from the mind. But the solution's not in the mind. The solution is finding that way that our body actually needs to be fueled. So my mind was getting really, really loud because I was continuously giving my body what it didn't want, all of these ingredients. And so especially for my determination, if I'm giving my body all these different types of information at once, when my digestive system can only handle one thing at once, what do you think the mental space is going to feel like? Confusion, so many different narrations and stories and energies, and like really just like a clusterfuck, like confusion central. And that's how it felt. And so the reason that was such a ball of drama for me is that I kept feeling that intensity, confusion, all this in my mind, and I wanted to avoid all that because it was so overwhelming and stressful that it would bring me into a stress response. And when I would go into that stress response, that's when I often would overeat or reach for more food, and that food would continuously be either more than I needed, or both more than I needed, and many, many, many ingredients, or at least a lot more than what my body actually wanted. So that's kind of painting a little bit of a picture of what was going on. So now fast forward to this moment where I'm choosing to now give my body the fuel that it wants. So what's happening is that my mind is now suddenly a lot more spacious. I'm going to give like the full story of this. For the most part, there's less extremes of intensity. So even if my mind has something negative to say, even if it's going into something hard, there's a softness to it. There's space around it. It doesn't feel so clung to. Let me see if I can think of a better word for this. It doesn't feel so much like me. Like there's more ability to take a step back from everything that's going on and be like this kind of neutral witness to it. So it's not that all of the negativity has gone away completely. It's not that everything is like 100%, amazing. But there is such a big shift in my mental space. I'm also picking up on a lot more information in the psychic field. I'm also feeling how did I explain this yesterday? So before, it was kind of like when I would hear somebody talk, that too is food, right? It's information coming in. So when I would hear somebody talk before, when I was eating not according to my determination, it felt very jumbled. It felt like my mind was trying so hard to conceptualize and understand what they were saying, but I wasn't really understanding it. Now it feels like there's so much more space in my mind and in my body to receive that information, and it feels like I'm not trying to analyze it so much. It's just naturally being understood. That to me is a huge shift. I don't know if other people experience that intensity when they're not eating in accordance with their determination, with like if they have other determinations, because I've heard that this specific determination can be a pretty intense one to see the change from eating many ingredients into eating one. That it's one of the biggest shifts, because our digestive system is so primitive that when you do make that change, that you have the potential to have some of the biggest or most drastic shifts in your life from this, which is really, really cool. And it's also not so cool when you're not eating in alignment with it, because it crowds up everything. It feels like it's crowding up receptors that are supposed to be able to take in information and help you understand them, and it felt like I had all these wires crossed. So that's been a new experience for me as well. And then lastly, another thing that I've been feeling a lot of, and I don't know if this is just because of determination, is probably many things, to be honest. Because I'm doing a lot of different things to support my health and just, self-love. So this could be many things, but I have a feeling that my determination has been a big part of this as well, because it's made the biggest jump in the last couple weeks. And that is noticing a difference in my motivation. So in human design, for those of you watching, if you're probably into human design if you're watching this, so you might know about something called motivation. And I don't remember how many different motivations there are. I want to say 6, but mine is innocence. And then there's something called transference, which is like I don't know enough to teach anything on this, but I'll just give what I know, is that when you're kind of like out of alignment, or you're not living in alignment with your strategy and authority, you're experiencing like it's opposite exactly, but like the other side is transference. So you experience your motivation through the other pole, which is, for me, desire. So the way that I see that in my life is that I realized in the last 2 weeks that so much of my behavior, so many of the things that I was doing in my life was coming from desire, but not necessarily like because I don't think that desire is bad. But what I realized for myself is that the desires that I had were desires that were very conditioned. Like, I should want this thing. So now there's this desire to get there because I was told that that's the thing to do. And in the last 2 weeks, I've been contemplating a lot and just sitting in meditation. And I've noticed that there's been this deep simplification, this spaciousness of just like really just wanting to be. And in that simplicity of, it feels like there's a lot of desires falling away. It feels like there's a lot of space opening up, and it feels like the motivation that does come is coming from this really like beautiful, pure, innocent space within me, rather than this like urgency that comes from desire of like, a lot of times my behaviors would be coming from this like, I have a mental thought that turns into a pressurized response to get to this desire, but there's always this like urgency behind it of like, I need to get there. And now I'm noticing that there's this like big empty feeling inside of me. And at first I almost started to categorize this as a bad thing, because let me see if I can do this justice. When we have something like a way of living that's become so much like autopilot or normal, so for me, going after desire, if my behavior is constantly coming from this pressure, urgent desire feeling, it, no matter even if it's good or bad, whatever, it can become the normal. It can become the norm. So I was conditioned to feel that that's kind of like my baseline, that urgency, that desire, that these like all these, this stimulation, all this, that was my norm. And so now as I'm eating more simply and eating what actually my body is desiring, giving it the proper fuel, I'm finding this space and this emptiness and this stillness and this innocence inside, and that vastness. At first, my mind was interpreting as like wrong or bad because it was different. And this can be applied to so many places in our lives. Is that sometimes when we make a shift, if we're so conditioned that something is giving us huge dopamine spikes or this feeling of a high or drama, that when we take that away, our mind can say that something's wrong because we've been so addicted to it. And so there's a recalibration period where we don't want to let ourselves fall back into going towards that drama, towards those spikes of highs and lows or whatever, because that's not neutrality, right? That's duality, and that's the swing of the pendulum from extreme to extreme where we get so exhausted, right? So we're trying to find that space of neutrality. And now I'm feeling like, oh my God, this is actually what I really want, but it's going to feel abnormal for a little bit. As I recalibrate to make this the new norm, this space might feel kind of foreign. This lack of drama, this lack of stimulation might feel really bizarre. So that's kind of where I'm sitting in right now, is like, I still feel like this is so new, but within 2 weeks, and to be able to feel all of that is really, really cool. And it just makes me really excited to want to keep going. It's actually a lot easier than I would have ever imagined. It is so much harder to be in the space where you're thinking about it, where you're thinking about, oh, I could start eating according to my determination, and then all the guilt and shame when you don't, and like all the mental shit that's happening in that space was so much harder than actually just committing to it and trying it. And once I started to feel, honestly, right away, like as soon as I started it, I could just feel that this was something really important for me to try, for me personally, not saying for everybody, but it felt pretty fucking natural, to be honest. There are moments where I like go through the store and I'm like, oh, I kind of miss that thing. But there's something in me that's like, this is going to pay off so much more than any fleeting pleasure of the senses. And it's really been just finding things that I love to eat, finding ways where it doesn't feel like I'm depriving myself. It's been so much easier to listen to my body in terms of amount of food. There's just a lot more space, a lot more serenity. I've even gone through the last 48 hours of being in some of the darkest shadows that I've ever gone into in my life. And through that, I even felt how much space was around all of it, how much ability there was to hold it. So it's not that this is going to make your life perfect and take away all the challenge and the shadows and all of that. But when you fuel yourself properly, you have the ability to feel that neutrality. You have the ability to feel that there's an ease in the ability to feel that you're more than just this. Because the mind, when we're so, when the mind gets really, really dense, meaning like loud and chaotic and drama and just so many stories and so many different things happening up here, that is Maya. That is the land of illusion that blankets true reality. So when people talk about like enlightenment, they're talking about realizing the true self, being beyond the mind, beyond Maya. Nothing can like technically lead you to enlightenment, right? But what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing is that when you're eating in the way that your body wants to eat, there's less mental noise. And so it's almost like there's an easier ability to tap into the natural state of meditation throughout your day, if that makes sense. There's less clinging to the separate self because the mind is the separate self, right? The mind is the belief in the separate self. So if there's less screaming in the body that something's wrong, there's less screaming in the mind that something's wrong. And without all that noise and screaming, there's an ease and ability to see what is true, what's actually here. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh, is this something I want to experiment with? Is this something I want to try out? I encourage you to try it, even if it is for a week, 2 weeks, a month. I bet you anything that if you give it 2 weeks, give it a month, that it will create change that will allow you to see yourself in your life in a very different way. It'll allow you to see through certain patterns or habits that might have felt like they've been there for years. They might just drop away. They really might. It's been really surprising to me to see things just kind of dropping off, and I was like, what? I didn't really expect that to happen. So that is where I'm at right now, and I will continue to share. I would love to hear if anybody is watching this and what you're getting from it, or if you have questions that you want answered, or if you've experimented with this. I would love to hear in the comments below. Love you all, and I'll see you in the next video.